Hello and welcome to the Naked Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Emerald Maraid, and I'm so glad you're here. This space is devoted to real, raw, and radically honest conversations with some of the most magnetic, diverse, and wonderful humans I've had the honor of crossing paths with. From mystics to makers, teachers to truth seekers, this is a home for anyone craving depth, connection, and clarity. At the heart of this podcast is a mission to unshame the human experience. We're here to dismantle the silence, to bring to light what we've been taught to hide, and to reclaim our voices through storytelling. Whether we're unpacking grief, celebrating joy, exploring sensuality and identity, or getting curious about what it really means to live an authentic and meaningful life, nothing is off limits here. This is a community built through conversation, a place where you get to feel seen, embraced, and reminded that you're never alone. So get cozy, stay open, and let's get naked in the most soul-expanding, liberating way possible. Welcome to Naked Conversations. So wonderful to have you on the podcast, Niño.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
I don't know if you can't really perceive the smile on my face if you're listening to this podcast, but I'm really happy to be here and happy to be having this conversation with you today. It's very inspirational because I've been following you for quite some time on social media, and I just found it so kismet when you came into Calm. I was like, oh, I know this person.
That is very synchronistic. I think we were just saying just before we started recording how I really believe that everything we're doing is leaving kind of energetic imprints in the universe and space and time. And in a way, the moment that I really believe, like in some ways, the moment you even began to interact with my content or even felt any emotional charge towards it, you likely then created some kind of energetic connection with me, and if not the creation, or the creation, and if not myself as well. And so to me, it makes such logical sense. And really, this is like how my brain works. So I'm like, no, spiritual shit is logical shit. If you're willing to believe that you are in fact a part of kind of an energetic field of vibratory matter that you are interacting with.
1,000%. And I think even to just go a little bit further with that, I mean, I was watching one of your reels this morning and you very much spoke to like the energetic field that we're working in. And that's something that I've been personally working with for quite some time. And it's very difficult to actually even put into words. And I find that you're very articulate in the way that you express that. And I feel as though personally, I've been kind of living in that energetic field, but to actually express it is a major reason why I started this podcast, actually, to have more conversations about this, of, the things that come into our lives and how it energetically vibrates with, effectively where we're at in our own, personal journey.
Thank you. That's very kind. And I mean, to give you your flowers, you are a very articulate person. And honestly, and perhaps it's probably why I even said yes to be on the podcast. This makes me sound like an asshole, but I've had quite a lot of people ask me to be on their podcast, but not everyone's very articulate. And I'm not really interested in having conversations that will be publicized that aren't with two articulate people. Because I honestly think it's very annoying to listen to a podcast if somebody doesn't have that skill. And you do have that skill. Oh. Let me reaffirm to you.
I very much appreciate that, and it's very deeply received. Thank you.
Yeah, you're a very good communicator. And thank you.
So tell me a little bit about your journey and how I guess that's a bit of a loaded and long question, but what kind of brought you to the space that you're in currently?
Time. No, given the context and nature of your podcast, Naked Conversations, I'll try to keep my answer, aligned with that. I mean, what brought me to this place as artist of the spirit, poet, life coach, writer, wellness guide, retreat host, all these little hats that I wear, as well as, avid adventurer, hiker, traveler, idiot, fool, jester. I think it really was in some ways a combination of like natural interest. When I was very, very young, I told my dad I'd like to be a Jedi. He informed me that unfortunately Star Wars was in fact fiction and I would not be able to be a Jedi. Now, I was 4 years old and I think I was overcome with a lot of grief in that moment, and he very quickly tried to amend his mistake and said, well, you could be an actor, and actors play as Jedi. And the idea was then, okay, I'd like to be an actor. And at first, as a young kid, I don't really understand, but I started taking acting classes. I started booking commercials, and I love it. You know, I'm a middle child. I like the attention. I like that it's fun, it's playful, and I'm making money, something I'm not even fully sure I understand at the time. But from a young age, I was gripped by stories, and stories, namely from movies, later books, but books didn't capture me first. I think movies, like films did, particularly Star Wars, and it's where I built a lot of my early morality from, which confuses some people, but for me it makes a lot of sense. I found that the tales of the Star Wars is a conversation around spirituality, of the dark side and the light side, yet the nuances regarding that an ordered force of good can actually become blind to its own arrogance, and that's the tale of the fall of the Jedi. So I was already kind of at 10 years old, I'm at a bookstore looking at a religious text with my I'm just passing by the religion section, and I turn to my dad and I say, well, why do I have to believe in the Catholic God? Why can't I just believe in the Force? And he's like, well, the Force is fictional. I said, yeah, but I mean, you has as much evidence as your God, you know, like, and he's like, that's not like an appropriate thing to say. And I said, no, but truly, I'm just saying, I believe like what you're saying, that there's this force, you know, like God. But the whole point is like, why do I have to believe it the way that I'm being told? So at 10 years old, I was already kind of caught in this challenging. I think it's part of my natural personality. I have what's called a score of 3 on politeness, which refers to how deferential you are to authority, which means that there is no part of me that is instinctually respectful to authority. It's just not natural to me. And my natural state is to question authority.
Possibly a little bit of rebellion in there as well.
A little rebellion. The Star Wars theme continues. So let's say early on, there's like a philosophical questioning of my religious upbringing as a Catholic, based on my obsession with Star Wars and humans, because acting in part became a character study of, well, people, humans, what makes us us. As I'm getting older, to be honest, I experience a lot of loss. At 13, my grandmother committed suicide, and at 15, my aunt's murdered. I'm going to Sunday preparatory school for my confirmation, having conversations with the pastor, saying like, is my grandmother in hell because she was mentally ill? Who are you to determine that? And God bless his soul, he's doing a very good job of trying to navigate that, you know, moment. And then, you know, also talking about like murder, and I'm having to conceptualize like what that is. Like, whoa, this isn't just like an idea, this has now happened to my family. All that to say, then by 18, I have what people now refer to as spiritual awakenings. And it really was born out of like a kind of a bitterness and resentment to the world, where I was so over everything. I had just begun to accept that the world was this hyper-capitalist, materialistic realm in which my highest goal was pretty much fuck people and make money. And I was like, okay, I can do those things. I'm smart enough to do that. But it's like there was a resentment that was the option I was given, and that was it. That's what I thought. And then as cliche as it is, I took some acid, albeit not the first time I did psychedelics, alone in my university dorm room. I had just been reading some Alan Watts, a little bit of Eckhart Tolle, and I had my ego kind of poked at by this humanities professor. She was brilliant, and I guess all those things in combination with this random psychedelic journey in my own room, I remember like waking up and having this awareness, oh my fucking God, I've been living through my ego. I've been living in a story about who I am, what the world is, as opposed to recognizing that story is ultimately a story. And although I have been conditioned to accept the story and the narrative of our material reality as the truth, that's just the story they're telling me. And that really began a process that has now unfolded over many years to kind of get me here. I know that it's such like a long-winded response, but I'd say those were like some early cataclysmic moments that then naturally resulted in the unfolding of studying psychology, getting into this space, and just trusting the universe.
Thank you so much for sharing. There's so many different, you know, threads and themes that I could pick up on in that. I mean, the whole story of becoming an actor, right? And how spiritual acting can even be, you know, of recognizing different archetypes and recognizing where that lives within us. and as you've shared your story of how you've gotten to where you are today, recognizing like that ego and that story that many of us hold, right, as a result of our childhood experiences and, of the conditionings that we've had, as you've mentioned, the Catholic upbringing, and that's something that I can relate to as well. My story is obviously very different than yours. However, I think when we're presented with these narratives of how it is that we should show up in the world, it doesn't leave much space for the authenticity and the truth of who we really are. Especially if we are living in a dualistic paradigm where, in the human 3D experience, we're constantly being shown mirrors about, where it is and how we can get back to our authenticity and how we can get back to who we are in our truth. It can become quite confronting if we're constantly feeding into a certain paradigm or narrative that feels true to us based on, what's being mirrored to us.
It's kind of this interesting interplay or exchange of like, you are human, you are experiencing the passage of time, you experience reality as if there is a past, a present, and a future incoming. As such, it's going to be very normal, natural for you to create narratives, consciously or unconsciously. And in fact, part of that is developing an ego. It's good to have a healthy ego. It's not good to not have an ego. I mean, most people cannot function without an ego. They become psychotic, catatonic. You're not an enlightened spiritual master. You don't know how to do it. It's okay. But can we also negotiate with the ego to be like, yeah, I'm here. Yeah, there's a story of who I think I am, but I'm open to the possibility that story can change and is ever dynamic, ever flowing. It isn't static.
Totally. It's an evolution, as always. And I think that that's what life is really here to show us, is that evolution of our own consciousness. And it does sound, especially as I receive what you're saying, it sounds like you're very much on that path to coming back to consciousness and back to wholeness of self.
It is a continual journey. And I think the fun of it, and this is something I try to remind myself, at least for me, is the process is of forgetting and remembering. And you're not meant to always remember, because if you were constantly remembered, you'd kind of that's Buddha. That is nirvana. And I experience moments of nirvana, but I don't want I think a part of me likes being a bodhisattva. I like partaking in the world. I like partaking in the dramas because I also trust that I'll remember again.
1,000%. And it is a constant remembering, right? And I think that is kind of that middle way that I think we've spoken to in the past, right? It's, the forgetting and remembering, as you've very eloquently put it. It's like, well, we can't have, pure light without an understanding of the dark, right? And is it even true if it's not conscious? If is what I mean by that. And I can kind of give an example or, try to illustrate that in another way. But if we're constantly feeling like in a blissed out state, then how will we remember who we actually are if it's not conscious and we're not coming back to it constantly through the challenges that are being presented to us?
Oh yeah, 100%. There's a lot of beauty in challenges. There's an Instagram video I'm about to make. I wrote this reel about it, but it was, ask somebody to tell you what made them who they are. Nobody responds to that question with, it was so incredible. I went to this incredible Hawaiian vacation. It was amazing. We got treated incredibly. The food was perfect. Oh my God, I had this incredible vacation fling. It's great. It's hedonistic pleasure. It's wonderful, wonderful. But the things that make us or help reveal who we are, let's say,
and define us,
is the challenge. It is the moments where your soul is rocked forth from some kind of slumber and you push past the cavern and you crumble through that wall. And it's in that struggle that, the struggle either helps you break through or can break you down. But either way, I think there's some value in that.
I would agree wholeheartedly. I mean, it's becoming an initiate, really. It's the initiation of a dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
As you've just spoken to. It's like when we break down leads to breakthrough.
Yes.
Always and forever.
I'm curious, when was your dark night of the soul?
How long is this podcast going to be? Oh my gosh. I I want to preface the dark night of the soul by saying I grew up with a lot of unmet childhood needs of feeling deeply alone, deeply abandoned, and really seeking love in a variety of different forms. And when I was 26, I had met somebody, and it was everything that I'd ever ever wanted in a partner. Literally, like, so perfect in every way, shape, and form. Intelligent, came from a very wealthy family, treated me like a princess. Like, it was just kind of a dream come true moment. Ka-ching! Everything is great. This is like an equal match in so many different ways. And that was clearly affirmed by, every time we would go out together, people would stop us in the streets and say, oh my gosh, you're perfect for each other. And it was so much coming from this place of like unmet desire and this like yearning for validation and of like a yearning for feeling whole and complete. And it felt like that inner child was just so satiated in that moment. And I know that that's what, like, there was so much brightness and light that was coming from that interaction and exchange. But as the relationship progressed, I had no idea what narcissistic abuse was. And it started to devolve into a very, very codependent and narcissistic dynamic between the two of us. And I had this, this fantasy that this person was somebody that they truly weren't at the end of the day. And as the relationship started to break down, there came a point where I was like, this is not the life that I'm meant to live. Like, I can, go full in on this relationship and completely and totally come undone mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. And I think a part of myself did die in that relationship. This hope that I had, this like unconditional, I don't want to say unconditional love has ever died, but it definitely was a reawakening of understanding of my own boundaries, understanding of my own worth, and a real reclamation and reckoning of that. So I think that would be my dark night of the soul coming out of that during COVID. I had moved to Toronto to be with this person. And about 3 weeks into moving to Toronto, the relationship started to break down and it became quite violent. And I did have this kind of come to Jesus moment, if you will, of things have got to change. This is not the life for you. It also coincided with my Saturn return. It was just a whole mess.
Holy
and
smokes.
Yeah. So I think that was my dark night of the soul. And that was kind of a catalyst to a remembrance of, who I came here to be. And it's been such an excavation of self.
I'm curious about your opinion of that, because in spiritual circles, there's conflicting narratives or ways of talking about, let's say, remembrance, coming into wholeness, achieving our highest self, different platitudes. Some people seem to define this process as like, there is some destiny awaiting me, there is some set thing, and I'm here to awaken that destiny. That other people talk about it much more as like, I am the creative force, I'm co-creating reality with God, and as such, there isn't any like one way that I am to be. I'm just going to, be the creator. I'm an artist here. Where do you fall on that? How do you navigate that yourself?
Interesting question.
Or is that something you don't think about and you're more present?
I do have a pretty strong practice of self-reflection, I want to say, and a very deep understanding of a lot of like the core shame and the core narratives that have kind of driven the bus of my life, if you will. And what I've come to, and I think it's just really been over the last few years, I'd say probably the last year or two, of understanding what those core emotions are and understanding like where they live in my life. And, I, off the top of my head, I know like alone, abandoned, rejected, unsafe, and betrayed are a few of them. And I think I'm missing one. Worthless. That's the last one. And, if those deeper energies aren't met within ourselves, then we're going to continue to perpetuate that. We're going to see it everywhere, and it's going to come up in all of our different triggers. And if we're not met with that, then, or if we don't kind of reconcile what those mean in our lives, or deeply sit with them and give those parts of ourselves, a sense of divinity or comfort or compassion, or like all of these, higher spiritual teachings that so many of a variety of different, world religions speak to. And it's about love at the end of the day, love and compassion. So I do think that we are constantly being mirrored, and, those things are coming up in our quantum field constantly. So I do think it is a dance. Really, at the end of the day, it's a dance with God, the universe. It's like, well, how can I get back to being who I came here to be?
Yeah,
and
it's beautiful.
Yeah. I really do think, like, those times where we go through the dark night of the soul, it's like, oh, you're really faced with all of it, like worthless, abandoned, alone. And that's what happened with my story. It's like all of those things were coming up. Do I want to lean into it, or do I want to just, pretend that it's not about me? When everything is always about you at the end of the day. It's never about someone else. It's about, like, how you decide to relate to the energy that's being presented to you.
It's the seeming paradox. So beautifully said. I believe I live within a continually unfolding paradox that has always been, yet it will never be. It's a paradox. And part of that paradox is navigating this weird reality that it is all about me. It's like, no, this is all about me. But it's also all about you. And and that's the joke. It's all about all of us. But the way that we connect with the paradox, in a way, in the way that we actually find unification through the paradox, is for each individual to clean up their own shit. You clean up your own shit by focusing on how your reality is all about you. And that's the joke. It's like, so each individual must act as if they are creating their entire universe, hold themselves to the highest degree of accountability, responsibility, compassion, grace, all that wonderful stuff. And then everyone doing that, great! We've now changed the world. But you can't change others for them. Sure, you can be a guide, you can take up certain roles, you can clear your own stuff as best as possible so you can help people by being a mirror so they can see themselves more clearly. But you can't do anything for anyone. That's the joke. And no one can do anything for you.
No one. You can lead I think the ethos and the whole, I suppose, thing that I've been dealing with my entire life is you can lead somebody to water, but you cannot force them to open their mouth and take a sip of water. There's no way.
And I believe this is part of the annoying part of being on a journey that I thought was going to be special. Is when I started, I'm going to tell you, I started young. When I had my awakening, there was no community. There was no, I was literally the only person I knew who had had an awakening. It wasn't a thing on TikTok. TikTok didn't exist. On Instagram, it's like, no. The people, I knew there were philosophers who touched on certain things. I knew there were spiritual teachers. And that was all, like, I was aware of, let's say. All that to say, when I went into this, I really believed, like, I'm going to figure something out. I think I'm going to learn something that, like, no one else has figured out, dude, because I'm fucking smart. Like, I'm really smart. And, like, my teacher, my professor in university just stopped me and said, hey, you have a very special mind. So that was my introduction. Like, whoa, bro, I'm going to figure something out. Now, 10 years down the line, every cliche is true. It is all about love. Literally everything that, like, an old grandmother told you, no, that's like the highest truth. It is be the change you want to see. Spread love.
Embody kindness.
It's so simple. It's so annoyingly simple. But when you're young and when you're, young on your journey, let's say, not that I'm some old, but wherever the hell you are, it just seems too easy. It's like, oh yeah, well, if it were that easy, then we'd be there. It's like, no, it's very hard to be kind. It's really hard to embody love because it ultimately stems from the relationship with yourself. And like you so acutely pointed out, most of us have, well, like you said, unworthiness, shame, feelings of feeling abandoned or rejected.
Alone, all of those things.
And they're mirrored and recreated in all of our dynamics if they're not looked at. Most people don't look at it. So, well, of course you live in a world that feels alienated, disconnected, at war. You're at war with yourself.
It's a whole circle. It's the circle of life. It's the circle of energy. It's the quantum that we are living in, And I think that the sooner that we can get out of the idea that anybody has done anything to us, it's just energy recycling itself constantly unless we sit with it. Because as one of my mentors says, awareness plus acceptance equals change as a constant.
You cannot actually do something, this is from Osho, you cannot actually act immorally if you're conscious. Because there's no way that if you were truly conscious of what you're doing, that you would ever act immorally. Your fundamental state is love. You are vibratory love that's mistaken itself for anything else. If you were conscious of that, you would only act through that. But we're not always all conscious. That's fine. That's human. You forget.
Yeah.
But that's why it is important to be conscious.
Yes.
and whatever that means, like whatever can help stimulate that for us, whether that's community, whether that's religion, whether that's spiritual practice, whether that's movement. Like each person, I really believe, is a unique, individuated expression of the divine. This is just stolen from the Bhagavad Gita, by the way, but each of us are individuated units of the divine, and each one of us has certain characteristics that we're born with, and that means that some of us have to take slightly different path, whether that's, bhakti or I forgot the other one, the king one, which is the mix of them. The point is, each one of us must walk a slightly different path, and it might look different, but there is a unique kind of way that each of us ought to, let's say, show up in the world to be as conscious as possible. And that's why I am so fundamentally against dogmatic understandings of what it means to be spiritual.
Oh my goodness, I could not agree more with you on that. And as you were speaking, I'm just thinking of the ways that we even avoid ourselves in that path back to ourselves. I think anything can be an avoidance, especially if you are quite intelligent. We have so many protections against feeling the deeper things that are elicited when we're faced with some sort of trigger. It's easy to intellectualize, and it's easy to to outthink that or to protect ourselves. And as you've said, like, it's understanding that we are love incarnate at the end of the day, and learning that path back for ourselves, whatever that means, is something so individual and very, very beautiful. It's like life is constantly unfolding, and there's really no destination. Destination is death. So might as well have a good time with it. You might as well have fun.
That's kind of the irony of it all. Well, I mean, the only thing promised in life is death. We are born unto death. That is both the greatest gift you could be given in life, and yet also the source of all existential anxiety and fear. That's literally, we fear death. Yet it also can be the liberation from living a life that does not suit you, liberation from living in fear of things that don't kill you. Because when you realize Armageddon is what awaits you, well, maybe you might just be a little bit more playful. Damn, maybe you're not going to waste an hour of your day getting upset because some dude cut you off in traffic. Do what I do and say, fuck you, motherfucker, in the moment, and then go, whew.
Okay. We're good. We let it go.
I'm not perfect, but I honestly am very proud that almost nothing I carry. To the point of sometimes, I tell people, I go, I'm kind of like a goldfish. I have a moment and I'll go fuck you. And 10 minutes later, I'm over it. Because I gave myself permission to feel it. And that's the whole issue. My fundamental issue with spiritual community, spiritual dogma rather. It's such a, sometimes among certain people, there's such a rejection of what are deemed negative emotional states. And I actually made a video about this. So I said, the highest vibrational state is not one where only positive emotions are experienced. The highest vibrational state is where every part of existence is accepted, like you said. Acceptance. But acceptance isn't, oh, I don't feel negative. No, it's, oh, wow, I'm actually feeling pretty fucking triggered and upset. Wow. And you just feel it. There's no story. You don't need to intellectualize it. You just feel it. Maybe you transmute it if it's something really painful, like grief. Maybe you turn that into art. If it's anger, maybe you go run. Maybe you go start a social cause. There's ways that we as alchemists can take energy that's not going to pass easily and transmute it into creative force as we, the creators we are. But that's what it means to be high vibrational. Not, I'm just unaffected by everything. It's like, no. What you've done is create some kind of brilliant ego shell. Yeah, that you don't allow anything in. And that thing is dangerous because it's convinced itself that this is the highest vibratory state.
I am so glad that you've spoken to that, because that was going to be one of my next questions, is like, sometimes you do see in these spiritual communities this kind of ego around, even wounding in and of itself. It's like, well, this is my wound. And it's becomes this,
dick swinging contest.
Yeah, basically. Or just like, we're connecting over this wound that we've had so deeply within ourselves. And it's like, okay, that wound has clearly come to teach you something. And the teaching is in the meeting of it, and the meeting of it is not necessarily something that even belongs to you. A lot of the time, it's something that is ancestral or kind of lives within your family unit that you've subsumed in your narrative of growing up. And it's very powerful when we can meet that. And, as you've spoken to, like, it does sometimes require, movement, and changing that narrative in the physical, not just simply, okay, I'm feeling this, breathing into it and, being with it, because sometimes it is much bigger than us.
And if you don't have the willingness or the intent to change the narrative, you're ultimately, even if you learn to be a really good person at emotional regulation, all that wonderful stuff, well, you're going to be regulating yourself over the same patterns the rest of your life. I mean, this is where my perspective on life starts getting quite radical for most people, but I'm like, I take accountability for the trauma that happened to me, almost as if I'm at fault. Not that there is fault to give, but I like to imagine, whether it's literal or just a philosophical choice, I chose this life. I chose every experience that I'm having. It's in the choosing that I become a true king. My archetype is the masculine, the queen, whatever, is king. What is kingdom? A king lays claim to his kingdom. My kingdom is my life and my experiences. I don't give it to anyone else. It's mine, which means that it's my shit to deal with. Oh, I was hurt by someone who I loved and trusted as a kid. That sucks. And I'm going to go talk to that inner child and do the emotional processing and work. And then I'm going to go, and guess what? They weren't even at fault. They're not guilty either, because they belong to a lineage, generational trauma that extends millions of years to times where, like, we were being hunted by saber-toothed tigers. Who's at fault? No one. It just happened.
It is. Accept it. Accept it all as your own, as if you've chosen it yourself.
As if you've chosen it.
Oh my gosh, so beautifully said, and I could not agree more. It's in the acceptance that we can actually find that sense of ownership, really and truly. Oh, so beautiful.
It can, just to make your podcast slightly controversial for a moment.
Go for it.
I see and I understand why there is such a resistance to this from people who hear it, who also are aware of the fucking level of atrocious insanity that exists on Earth.
And, even to have this conversation, it's not that it was no one's fault. Like, that's the thing. It was no one's fault. It just was.
Exactly. But we all want to blame, we're tribal creatures. We see atrocity, like a genocide that's currently happening. And we're so quick to want to be like, or who's at fault? Like, oh, you're at fault because of this. And now we're in a historical question. And I go, I think we're all at fault. Like, we are all part of this. And it's either all of us are or none of us are. I'm going to tell you that right now. Because if we start doing no, you guys are and we're innocent thing, oh my God, that doesn't get us anywhere. There's never been a time in history where othering the other person has ever led to anything other than a war that leads in the oppression, rape, pillage, and slavery of a people that then have to navigate that for the next few hundred years.
Completely.
We need a new paradigm. We need a new way of being humans. And it has to be a willingness to let go of tribal instincts and embrace new philosophical frameworks of existence, such that I belong to a universal something like, this is an example, take it if you want. I belong to a universal consciousness of which I'm like recycled energy and matter, continuously a part of this broader family called humans. And in fact, if you look deeper, just everything.
Yeah.
Okay, then maybe I'm not at fault and neither are they. And maybe we just start right now, because this is the only moment I have. And maybe at best, oh my God, all the cliches were right. I can start by being kinder to people in my community, spreading love. And maybe that's not empty and weak like some people are making it out to be. Maybe the strongest thing we can be, and this is a cliche quote, is to remain kind and soft in a world that so badly wants to turn us hard and rigid.
Oh my goodness. I mean, what you've just spoken to is very deeply resonant, like as we're sitting on this absolutely stunning and completely raped land, Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh nations. Like when we speak to like the idea of truth and reconciliation, for example, it's like honoring the truth and learning to reconcile. And, the treaties that this land has been, kind of founded on from like a colonial perspective is very much of, well, we've arrived here and this is ours now, rather than taking an approach of, well, this is what you have to offer, this is what we have to offer, and actually coming together and creating a different way and a new paradigm. And there are so many wisdom teachings of this creation of, the prophecy of the seven, I believe I'm going to have to go back and look at it. It's like the 7 fire prophecies that many, wisdom keepers of Turtle Island have had, effectively of, there will be people that come to this land, and it's like, how can we come with a sense of consciousness to welcome people to this land and understand that there will be a battle, of dark and light, and that darkness actually lives within us and it lives within them. And when we can come together and actually, understand that darkness, it doesn't have to become a genocide. So it's exactly what you've spoken to, of like creating a new paradigm of ways of relationship with one another.
And the new paradigm has to be founded, I really believe, in Western technological
linear.
We need things to progress in some way, and we need ancient indigenous wisdom of being. I see like that is the new paradigm. It's not about going back. Some people we like to glorify before we came. You're going to do that with this many billion people on Earth? It won't work. It doesn't work. Sorry, unless you are a fan of advocating for like mass death of most people, that's not going to work. Okay, let's not be silly. And wow, can we acknowledge the wisdom that these people have had for millennia, and they were so ahead of their time in that. Okay, great. And can we also acknowledge, wow, there was something pretty cool about using our brains to collectively build knowledge that now over thousands of years has developed magic. Your phone, this is magic. I'm going to tell you right now, you cannot actually explain to me how we're doing this.
No,
neither
absolutely
can I.
not.
And there's a few specialists who can give you the whole answer. And even they probably can't build it because the only way they could build it is if they had another person who knew another thing. And that's the beauty of technology. It is a byproduct of collective creation. All of it is, especially modern technology, which again creates kind of some issues economically in the sense that it's very specialized knowledge, but it is magic. In so many ways, it is the magic byproduct of millennia of human knowledge and putting our minds to the problem of how can we understand the material world as best as possible. And that's not nothing. It's not nothing, and it's not something that we should do away with quickly, just because we have abused it, misappropriated it, and fucking gone
so
way
far with the progress train. It has left the station and there's no stopping it.
Yeah. The moment we began to lose any real indigenous wisdom, which was like, whoa, you don't just do things for the sake of doing them, we definitely lost our way. But that's why it's like, okay, the way forward isn't going back. It's creating a new paradigm with what we got. And we still have connection to the indigenous wisdom. Like you said, the medicine keepers. We still have Amazonian tribes who live a certain way, who can share their way, who can, facilitate plant medicine ceremonies. It can bring and can help guide us back towards ourselves so that we may hopefully guide others in these processes and whatnot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And incorporating those, those ceremonies into our lives, like we have lost, living in, as a white person, I've lost ceremony. I've lost connection to my ancestors. I've lost connection to the land and the land of my ancestors. And, I think if we're to tie it way back to like the narratives, like those narratives lived on the land of my ancestors as well. And I mean, like to tie it into my work, it's like what's the word that I'm looking for? The, denial of the feminine. It's the denial of the natural cycles and patterns and wisdom of life, the denial of death, truly, and the fact that everything has a life and everything is within a cycle and pattern constantly. Things are being born so that they can die. And it's the denial of that and the denial of our deeply embodied wisdom and connection to the land that has caused this madness total madness. And not to deny the fact that, like, you know, as you spoke to, technology is so incredibly valuable. It's a way of sharing information. It's a way of, you know, expanding our minds and expanding consciousness, but it's coming into a balance of the two of them and a kind of a co-creation and interweaving a narrative that, you know, that brings together light and dark, masculine, feminine, right? Yeah. It's like, that is creation in and of itself. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And I mean, when you were speaking, I couldn't help but think, yeah, we did away with all female polarity, or like all the entire energy of the feminine. We essentially said, we don't need it. We don't need it. You're witches, please fuck off. We got this. What did that lead us to? Well, like I said, a lot of technology, great. And a lot of war, division, alienation, loss of pretty much all spiritual connection, and
rape of the land.
Yeah, exactly. Which, you know, very symbolic, as that is what men did for probably hundreds of thousands of years before we evolved past ape.
Yes.
Which is terrifying, and always like kind of something that I'm acutely aware of, like, I think as a man, which I think we ought to sometimes like hold the responsibility of, not to make this kind of a gendered conversation, but let me say, I think it is very important that if we are to be conscious people and considering a new earth, what does that look like? It's like having a real conversation that there is a polarity that exists. The yin and yang isn't just some silly symbol. It is really a truth that there are these two polarities, these two energies that exist within the universe, the feminine and the masculine. These polarities, when together, create a balanced, harmonious force that works within, creating, you know, the yin yang.
And regardless of gender identity, it exists.
It's not about gender identity. You can be whatever gender you want to be.
I'm just speaking to people who might think that,
I know.
You know,
and it's so
put
funny
things in a binary.
I'm like, it's not about, like, we're having two different conversations. You want to express yourself however you want? Oh my God, please, baby. Like, I love you. You are free. Don't listen to anyone else. And this is a real thing that exists.
Yes.
And to say that, I really believe in many ways the current, the healing of the current society lies upon the ability for men to integrate their feminine and women to integrate their masculine. Women have rejected the masculine because of the fact that it is appeared through a patriarchal force of oppression, which is really like a perverted version of itself that also alienates men from themselves and their real masculinity. So we need a complete rebalancing that, which essentially means, men, we need to understand the feminine, the emotional landscape of ourselves, the softness, the flow, letting go of our rigidity and opening ourselves up to faith, spirituality, things that fundamentally exist within the feminine polarity. And then again, with the feminine, the irony is it's less on them because it's more the male responsibility, given we have, more power. And for the record, it's not that, even if you disagree that we don't have more privilege or power because economic things have shifted and women actually are higher educated now, even if you believe that.
If we're talking about like diversity, inclusion, and equity and all these things that might be, you know, structurally imposed, continue.
Even if you believe that, I go, yeah, but dude, like, you have to acknowledge, I've never been around a woman and thought, oof, I better be kind so she doesn't like fucking kill or rape me. I've never thought that in my life. Why? Because sorry, darling, you couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. Maybe a few women could. But the point is, there is a weird, ugly, biological reality that for most of us, we have this power. And as such, I really think it's the responsibility to then, you must show the extra grace, the extra love. And I really believe that's where chivalry came from, and why I do believe in some senses that it is appropriate for the masculine to be a little bit more like generous with and extend himself for the feminine. It's not because we don't think you're capable. You're clearly capable. You've proven yourselves. You're more capable than we are in the workforce in many ways. But it's about recognizing that there is a difference between us, and in respecting the one imbalance, we create true balance by holding more space for you. But it's really hard because we're at this weird impasse where media has, you know, for better or worse, told women so much of the negatives of the masculine that they're convinced all masculine energy is negative, and that's just not true. And at the same time, the modern man has been chastised and castrated from his own masculinity because he's so often scared that his masculinity is fundamentally oppressive. That's not true. Neither the masculine nor the feminine is fundamentally good or bad. It's the light in the dark. You got a shadow. You got both, my dear. The feminine can be aggressive and manipulating and gossipy and destroyer in that ways. And men, well, we know our evil is, well, it's still pretty present out there. It's pretty obvious, you know. It's like destruction, physical violence, you know, that kind of stuff. So all that to say, I really think that the healing of the modern world lies in my ability, let's say, like taking my responsibility to integrate my feminine dynamic and my relationship with the feminine, and as such, the different for the others. Mm-hmm. And again, that's not to say that men might not also carry the father wound. Of course, it's just that I see that the biggest need, let's say on a societal level, is that because there is a war right now between the polarities.
I could not agree more.
Yeah.
I could not agree more. And I think it really is about like living on, on the wheel of life, right? Like understanding and integrating, the variety of different elements that we have, within the world and within us, north, south, east, west, emotional, physical, spiritual. Mental. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. So like bringing all of those things together and bringing them into balance within ourselves. And it's really about that integration. And, I think and I can speak to this from like a feminine perspective as somebody who grew up, having to take care of so many things, like very much in the masculine of like, I got to take care of this. I cannot trust a single person. I got to fucking make things happen. And there's a harm in that, right? Yeah. And there's like, that's an unintegrated masculine is really what it is. It's because it isn't in balance with, with the feminine flow of, truthfully knowing myself better now. It's like, well, that's actually like how I exist in the world of like, I want to be by the river and I want to be naked and I just want to like immerse myself, but you can't really have one without the other. And, more of one thing is not healthy as you've mentioned. And we could go so many different directions with this conversation, like from the macro, but down to the micro, individual to societal. But, whatever is within is without, as above, so below. Everything is kind of in constant relationship to one another.
I think that's why, that point is why, at least in my own work, so I work as a transformational coach, I do like to focus on the individual. Because for me, I go, look, yeah, there are clearly societal issues. But society is built of people, of individuals. If every single one of us was in genuine conscious space and in disagreement or had, let's say, more fundamentally unifying values, well, then the system would change, I believe. That's not an invitation to ignore the proliferation of the system, the way that systems proliferate their own dynamics, but rather that perhaps the way to begin to create radical change is through culture, not through systems. And because there's a practice I tell people to do sometimes, not my clients, but just friends. I go, I get it. We all want to create a new world. Let's think about how we do it. And like to action, I don't mean like theoretical, I don't mean like joke. I mean very seriously. All right, where do we start? Okay, so we have plots of land. You do that for long enough and you realize, oh, okay, you know what? Actually, a lot of what society has built is actually pretty great. And plumbing is pretty awesome. And this is pretty awesome. And okay, and you realize, I think, if you're humble enough that, okay, society isn't totally evil. A lot of the systems in place are actually pretty clever. And a lot of these systems are also corrupted. But they're corrupted by people because the system in of itself, we could improve it. Like politics, that makes sense. We elect people, and they help us. Wait, but why can corporations give them money to change laws? Oh yeah, shut the fuck up. Don't look at that. Okay. So clearly the systems have become eroded in certain places, but I'm not quite sure. I'm convinced that tearing everything down is the way forward. I'm not, perhaps I'm just not revolutionary enough. Perhaps I'm too comfortable in my comfort. But I also like to think it's just because I'm clever and I've realized that society we live in didn't just come out of nowhere. It came from thousands of years of mistakes, failures, civilizations arising, collapsing. And there are really good things about the society we live in. And again, this kind of goes to the conversation earlier. So I don't want to completely do away with it. I just think we need to have a very honest conversation about how we as individuals are participating in the eroding or erosive elements of that society. Like, for instance, the concept of money is a great idea. It's like, oh yeah, I get that. Of course, we need this kind of thing that we can then claim as like stands for value and we can exchange that thing, because I can't always like just literally exchange my service for that item because what if, I offer a service and you literally sell a physical item? It won't always make sense. Great concept, great idea. Oh, suddenly money is now backed through a debt financing system that then that banks have corrupted through the way that they create it, print it, or the governments create and print it, and the way that they work with banks now unfairly helps people of higher class. Okay, clearly there are elements here that have become erosive. Anyways, all that to say, I try to focus on the individual change because I think we need a conversation. We as a people need to have like a really like serious conversation of like, okay, what is not working? All right, what can we do to change this? And what is working, and how can we make that even better? As opposed to fuck the system, I'm fucking perfect, I don't need to work on myself. F the system, tear it all down. Well, guess what?
It's only going to perpetuate another system that is based on the exact same thing.
Because you guys are still unhealed. You're part of this. Like, I am too. Like, let's just take a bunch of unhealed people who have their own behavioral shit they got to work on. Okay, they tear down the system because they're so passionate about the bad system. Okay, well, you guys are all still flawed people. You're gonna create a very flawed system. I can promise you that.
History repeating itself constantly, and that's why history repeats itself, because the energies have not been met with
the energy hasn't actually changed.
It hasn't fucking changed. It's just taken on a new form.
And I'm really hoping, perhaps I'm naive, I'm really hoping that we can create slowly but surely the seeds in the world of a new earth without needing cataclysmic death. But sometimes I'm, not to sound very depressing, but sometimes I'm not so sure that's possible.
Well, yeah, things do need to die to be reborn in a way, right?
I hope it's a spiritual death. That's why I'm like, can it be like a collective, like, oh, we all have ego deaths, and then
I certainly feel like I've gone through that.
Yeah.
I feel like I've gone through that in the last, few months, but it does definitely feel like, things are starting to change, and people are realizing like the way that things are can't continue.
I think
and recognizing the individual implications of why things are the way that they are, and not just blaming it on systems or, it's like, well, gotta clean up your own side of the street.
It's so funny. I couldn't agree more. I've been using psychedelics since I was 15 to connect with Mother Nature, to have conversations with aspects of my psyche, sometimes for recreation in terms of just like doing a lighter dose and being in the woods somewhere and just being like, oh, beautiful. And one of the biggest journeys I took, probably the second biggest, it took about 5.5 or 6 grams of mushrooms, and I really went into it, with all these big questions around philosophies of the universe and the morality of good and evil. And it was so funny. At the end of this very like wild experience, I'm walking through my kitchen and I have a download, as you called it, and many people call it. And I go, and I've said it earlier, but I go, oh my God. I'm like looking for my notebook because I need to write this down. Clean up your own shit so other people don't have to. And I really was like, that's it. I just figured out the universe. In that moment, I thought, wow, you did it, kid. You went in there, you went into the darkness, you faced yourself, you experienced the merge of the oneness, and you came out, and guess what you wrote in that journal? Clean up your own shit so other people don't have to.
Profound, though.
Profound, so
in
deeply
its simplicity.
profound.
Profound in its simplicity.
And, really, the more that I meditate or I read spiritual texts, it doesn't matter what I do, it really is that. I mean, like the Zen Buddhists have said it. Chop wood, carry water. What are they referring to in that? Well, firstly, it's like what you think you're seeking in your spiritual path is just to stop fucking seeking. That's the joke. If you were truly enlightened, you'd just be here.
Be here, yeah. I mean, it's much be here now.
It's so cliche.
Simple,
it's so cliche.
But it's so simple. I have a former partner who, very much in the corporate world and very, linear, logical. But we were lying in bed one day and he said, I think the issue with the world is that everybody thinks that they need to be happy all the time. And I'm like, oh. Yeah, and people always think that there's a problem to fix, but it's just you need to sit with it. Like, oh, fuck. And it's so incredibly true. Like, we complicate things so much in our minds that it actually doesn't need to be so complicated. Just like live and let live, be and let be. Whatever arises, face it, move on.
The Buddhists,
Flow.
The Buddhists are right. We suffer because we grasp.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the visual metaphor that always connected with me was you never step in the same river twice. And in fact, if you're very literal, a river that's flowing, even as your foot steps into the water, it's constantly changing. Like there isn't a single moment of reality where there is static.
Yeah.
AKA, you're really fucking things up for yourself the more you try to grasp it, define it, close it.
Impermanence. It's impermanence.
All impermanent.
It's impermanence.
And
wow.
Again, and again, the paradox of that wisdom is something like, but in accepting that, you become the kind of person who has more impact and power. Like that's the joke. It's like, you claim, let's say, we want control, right? So this is like one of the paradoxes I teach a lot of my clients. You're seeking control. Yeah, absolutely. I just want to control things. Great. Okay, well, the more that you become somebody who's okay with the uncertainty of life and can navigate what uncertainty feels like in the body, the more control you have. But it's not coming from what you think it.
by default of full acceptance, unconditional acceptance of what is.
Because now you feel like you're in control. Because the feeling of control what you think control will give you is a feeling of peace. Okay, but how you get peace is by accepting that it's always uncertain.
Exactly. That's actually what you're seeking beneath it all. It's like, well, just accept it. Accept the fear. Accept all of those things that you feel like we have control of absolutely fucking nothing.
Nothing.
We have control of nothing. Literally, there could be a meteor spiraling towards Earth currently. Yeah. 7 minutes, a solar flare, we could be dead.
That Juan de Fuca plate is overdue many hundred years.
We're done. We're done for. You know, it's an illusion. It's a complete and total illusion. You can just control the inner reality and through acceptance of what is. Oy. So I'm curious to know a little bit more about the work that you do as we're starting to kind of come to a close here. And yeah, I just want to know where people can find you. And yeah, if you wanted to just like...
Let me plug myself.
Yeah, plug it out. Plug it in.
Given all those things I just said about like changing the world, I do make money. And no, okay. So what I do...
Money is not the enemy.
Money's not bad.
Money is quite literally just fucking energy.
It's just energy.
It's literally energy. And does it even exist? Who knows?
It's just agreed upon idea for now.
Yeah,
I mean,
precisely.
We've
do
agreed
we even
that
exist?
Dogecoin has value. What the hell is that?
Collective agreements.
There we are. Now, so I mentioned it earlier. When I was 18, I had that big spiritual awakening, and I was in business school at the time. And at the University of Victoria. Well,
no
like
way.
I said, I
also went to business school.
Oh, no shit.
Interesting. Anyhow.
Well, I had completely kind of, like I said, I said, great, well, if the world only offers money and sex, well, I'm going to make a lot of money being a marketing manager because I'd taken AP psychology in high school, and I was like, okay, the mind, that interests me. I'm going to convince people to buy something they don't fucking need. Who gives a shit? Whatever. And so I have that awakening, and then I'm like, okay, but I continue it for one more year. The next year... or later on that year in the summer, my best friend, Khalil, God bless his soul, he had a psychotic break and he was very, very sick. And dealing with that experience, I just knew I don't care about anything other than this. Like, I care about my friend and I love him. And if I study psychology, maybe I can save him. And, perhaps I did enter with a bit of a savior complex. And, I was this private little counselor. He didn't trust anybody with the truth of his psychosis because it was quite profoundly intense. But I never judged. I was always the safe space. I intuitively knew you can't meet somebody who's in a crazy space with judgment and like analyze. You got to just meet them there. Like be there with them. And just like, okay. And like, again, you can bring them down through methods and whatnot. And that's what I did for 2 years. And then right as I was about to graduate, he did unfortunately overdose and pass away as drugs had become a refuge from his own mind. And while that was very, very painful, it was the greatest gift I was ever given because in his death, I found the freedom to live fully and then go, okay, I want to do this, but I know fundamentally I'm in disagreement with the medical model. I don't agree with the way that we currently conceptualize what a human is. So how can I act through a framework, an ethical framework that fundamentally I don't even agree with understands people. And I had honestly, I was lost for a while. I had this psychology degree and I didn't know what to do. I tried my hands in arts. I love expression and music. And in that whole journey, COVID hit, and my girlfriend at the time, God bless her soul, she's not dead. She's just not with me. She said, why don't you share about all these things that you love? And I thought, people are going to think I'm gay. And she goes, you are kind of gay. And I was like, people don't know that yet. And, she's like, why don't you share about psychology, spirituality? These are things you're passionate about. And I said, okay. And it was the best thing I ever did. I started sharing. It resonated. I collected a really big audience on TikTok at the time. And it also gave me confidence, because then I connected with all these coaches who said, kid, what are you doing? Be a coach. And I still drank a lot. And I was using cocaine when I would get very drunk. And I thought, I can't do it. It's out of integrity. And they would all of them say, it's fine. You're not going to be a sobriety coach. You do all these other great things. And I said, yeah, I get that. I get it. I'm very disciplined. I meditate, but I clearly have an issue. I know this is an issue, because it's a difference between recreational use and what I'm doing. I'm escaping something. Then I went through my shit. I dealt with it for 2 years. I went sober and just kind of okay, oh shit, okay. Dealt with that, my darkness. I won't get into it as we're wrapping up. And then after I dealt with it, I began coaching for free at first. And I just wanted to get my steps in there. And I'm very lucky. I really love that I studied psychology and counseling, because it gave me an incredible framework, especially Carl Jung's work. I became obsessed and I read every one of his books.
Oh my gosh.
I'm reading.
We'll have to have you on the podcast. We'll have you on the podcast again to discuss that, because we didn't even touch that, but we need to.
We can touch on that next time. And then from there I started building it. And now it's been over the last 2 years that I've built this business. Los Niños Services has become kind of a transformational coaching company where I guide people through 3-month journeys, sometimes 6 months or up to a year, but those are more specialized and intensive. And the whole point of this journey is to help people identify unconscious behavioral patterns, often stemming from childhood wounds, and then give them the space and a process where they can feel it, integrate it, and come into a more embodied wholeness. Now, I always tell people on the first call, I say, this journey is not about you becoming more like me, honey, because I'm me, and I'm great, and we got one. We need you. We need you in this earth, and we need your full expression. That means we're going to get naked, and we're going to bear our naked souls together. And that's my philosophy in this work, is that I'm naked with my clients, not literally, but physically, metaphorically, spiritually. And it's really in this container that transformation happens. And while, of course, I really appreciate, and I'm still trying to learn to integrate the flowers that I'm dealt from past clients, the truth is I'm not transforming them. They're just being given the space to be loved and transform themselves.
Oh, that is so incredibly beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing this work. It is so incredibly important and so incredibly needed to have that space for people to just fully express themselves and to be vulnerable. And I'm sure you're familiar, and many of the podcast listeners, I'm sure, are familiar as well with the work of Brene Brown, right?
And she's one of my best inspirations.
The best, truly. And I mean, I always go back to that TED Talk that she did about the power of vulnerability and the courageousness of our hearts to actually be witnessed and be seen. And, how that really is an act of revolution in this world.
Amen. Thank you for letting me be seen on this podcast. Thank you for opening up yourself and letting me see you today. I really appreciated your time.
It's so beautiful. I'm happy that we got to get naked together. Not metaphorically.
Hey,
metaphorically speaking.
You get naked. What's up? I'm a nudist at heart, okay?
Hell yeah. You're talking to a stripper here.
Don't be a perv. Come on. Nudity's fun.
Well, thank you so much for coming in today, and for just having a little chit chat here.
Thank you so much. If you're curious about me, check me out on Instagram and anywhere, YouTube, TikTok, as Divine Niño, ELDIVINE NINO. That is a shameless plug.
That is a shameless plug, but it'll be connected in the show notes. So if you want to find El Niño, you'll know where to find him through the show notes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being here and for letting this naked conversation move you. If something stirred in your heart or body, or if you felt seen, softened, awakened, or curious, I'd love to know more. come find me on Instagram and share what touched you. The intention is to make this a living and breathing relationship, not just a performance. And if you're longing to go deeper, to be met in the raw, and to tend to what's ready to unfold in your soul's calling, my one-to-one sessions are an intimate container for that, where we meet soul to soul, body to body, and in devotion to your truth and your light. You'll find details in the show notes. Until next time.